Hi, Karl-Heinz. Welcome back.
Hi, welcome back. Yeah.
So, 1.5 years ago, how we met us. So what I remember is my idea of Maven is convention over configuration. And I don't know how it happened, but it always, what I didn't like in Maven is the explicit configuration of everything. So my expectation would be, if I have a empty Maven project, I get the freshest released, at least compiler plugins, the Surefire plugins and FaceSafe plugin, and I wrote a tweet, and this tweet was retweeted several times about that, and all the Java E people, so they are really about convention over configuration, were on my side, and then you said, okay, if we do this, we will break the stuff. And then other Maven people joined, and there was a Twitter conversation. And Twitter is not really really well suited for conversations. So the idea was, to stop the conversation on Twitter and invite you and have a conversation why it is not possible. Because for me, it should be possible. So because if I start with a fresh Maven project, which is completely empty, I would like just to say jar and nothing else. I would expect to get the latest released Maven plugins, and I mean Maven plugins is how to call it, the core plugins, the jar plugin, compile plugin, whatever you call it. I don't know what the name is. So why it is not possible, or why it would break projects?
Let me start with that first. Okay, convention over configuration is a very good point here. Yeah, like the directory structure and all that stuff. Yeah, that it's most important, because many people ignore that and try to configure everything, like the source directory and things like that, or which tests will be executed from something like that, the naming convention of the test, unit tests, integration tests, and all that stuff that I'm seeing all the time, which shouldn't be done, because convention over configuration makes that easier. Yes. But on the other hand, what you're pointing out is a good point. So if you say, okay, I have an empty POM, for example, then saying, okay, you expect to get the most recent version of compiler, whatever, and we call them also the core plugin, I would say, compiler resources, install, things like that. Yeah. The point is, if you do that, then there must be an mechanism to say, okay, I need to download the most recent versions of them. Okay, that could be done. It's not a big deal in the end. But on the other hand, if you do that once, then you need to figure out, okay, I already downloaded them and reuse them. That can be done. It's done via the local cache. That works. But the problem is, what happens if there is a new release, for example, of the compiler plugin, the resources plugin, or something like that, if you build that same project 5 days later, for example. And then you come to the point and saying, okay, if I always pick up the first or newest release of those plugins, that could potentially break your build. And
this is
the
true.
Issue here.
Okay.
Yeah, there is some problem here. Yes, of course. But from the perspective of the simplicity to use, you're absolutely right. Then there should be a way to do that and say, okay, I have only a simple project setup, maybe in very simplistic POM file, and then it should be working. Yes. Most of the time, in the meantime, it does, but there are some problems with that, because in particular related to the plugins and to the configuration of the plugins. And now we are coming at that point, because at the moment, the mechanism is in that way. If you do that the first time, it will download that version for the plugins. And if you do that the second time, it works. It keeps using the one on the hard disk, which are in the cache. It doesn't change that. So the problem is, if you do that several times, it works. But the problem comes up if you do and just delete your cache, for example, which sometimes people do. Why not?
Yeah. This is CI/CD. CI/CD is actually
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I get this.
So,
but my impression is that even if I download the freshest Maven version, it doesn't come with the freshest core compile or core plugins which were available at the time. So this is what I would like to have. If I let's say if I download Maven 2.9, then I would expect, that all the core plugins are the freshest plugin I can currently get at the 2.9 time, and they can be locked down to the version. So this is my complaint, because it seems like some of the plugins, they are pointing our way back, and this is what I don't understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. There are two different perspectives. You are absolutely right. Yeah, that should be done. Yes, maybe. I'm not sure. In some circumstance, might be not a good idea. But let us focus on the first part. Yes, the point is that we do that, but not the most recent one. That's true. Because we have some idea and say, before we update something in the Maven core that uses the more recent versions of the plugin, we let them dry and things like that, and let them more test running from the community, because we usually say it should run at least a half a year before we update them in Maven core. That's the relationship we have in Maven core. Some plugins in there, and then we update them only after a half year of the release has been out there sometimes, to be more sure that there is no problem in there. That's the first part. But on the other hand, if we do that, it could already break people. And that's the other problem, because people using that way of setup. And then if we update all the time that, it might already break people's build. But that's exactly the point where we need to make a balance. Should we update to the most recent one? Always the recent one? Should we update the most usable or the most recent Java version, for example, which is defined by source code or release, depending on which JDK you're using, on things like that? That is also a little bit problematic, because what is the right choice here? And that's the way, because we are saying you should always configure your plugins to be sure that you get exactly the same plugins for every build. And it's a little contradiction to that, to make it more simple. Yes, that's true. And that is one of the points I don't like either.
Yeah, if you would like to have reproducible builds, you should lock down whatever you can. So all the core plugins come with version, period. If you don't do this, I would expect to get the freshest plugin. This is my thing, If you really, because what I will do, I will download the recent Maven, and if I change the Maven version, I would expect, okay, I will have to test my build. Maybe it won't work anymore. But then I know why. But right now, downloading the newest Maven version is kind of pointless for me, because why? I mean, because I don't even know what comes with the plugins, and I have to admit, I never declared, explicitly the compiler plugin or all the other plugins, but because for me it's just noise. If my system tests are passing, I'm happy. And this is a little bit different, I would say, environment. And so I would say expectation is, if you don't lock down the version of the plugins, your build may break, but it can break anyway, because at one point of time, you will upgrade the plugins, right? So, I mean, then this is pointless, because even if I don't declare anything and we just keep uploading Maven, in some years you will update the compiler plugin, and then will break my build. So you will have to do this. So I would say better strategy would be to with the freshest Maven version. So if you release Maven, ship Maven with all the plugins, core plugins with the same version, and then you say, okay, if you cannot live with that, then you have to declare, the explicit versions. And this is, for me, would be a very clear strategy, and I will like it a lot. And you get more feedback, because as you can say, to checking whether the plugins have bugs or not would be done by developers like me, who always check out the recent Maven version. And usually the project these days, the expectation is you're not using Maven and go to production, rather than you have a Maven on your developer machine, CI/CD, and then you have something, right? So you will notice that something breaks, and then you can always roll back to the latest Maven version, or even better, if it breaks, it's a compiler or jar or whatever plugin, so then I can lock down just this plugin to this version I need.
Yeah, that works too. Might be a better strategy. At the moment, we have not decided to do that, but we are discussing several things at the moment, because based on the idea of Maven 4 at the moment, we are discussing a lot of things at the moment, because to get a more let's say we would like to get more frequently output here at the moment. We have some points here that the plugins are not released often as it should be, maybe, and we would like to change that. And I think that might be also a point of discussion, because some other people already recommended that as well. Yes, of course. I wouldn't say that it's wrong or better than other things, but we need to make a decision and then go through that path and make that decision clear. And of course, to document that and communicate that to the community. That's the most important thing here.
Because it seems like now you don't have a decision, clear strategy, or at least because...
Yeah, that's to be honest, we have a strategy. We do that all the time as we did before. We didn't update all the time to the most recent one. We do that and wait until a half year at least and things like that. There are some steps in between. But yes, we should do that. Yeah, I think that could be done better. Yeah.
Yeah, or you can use some version, the semantic versioning strategy or whatever. Then you could say, any other update comes with the freshest and whatever, something like this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
we are already thinking about some of these points exactly the same way, because at the moment there are some discussions about on Reddit, on Stack Overflow, on the mailing list, something like that, because we are deploying or releasing some plugins with milestone markers. For example, Surefire is one of them, install plugin is one of them, and things like that. And people are not really understanding why we are doing that. The point is that we are doing that because the Apache releases must be done a final release, which means we need to do that and don't release or propagate snapshot releases, because we are not allowed based on the ASF regulations, which is a good thing. And the point is, should we continue that, and should we do that, or should we do really simple releases and say, okay, then we have a major change, for example, if something changed or not. That's the point. At the moment, we have some issues related to that, because we want to have a release which is tested by the community, which is done very, very well by using that milestone marker. But some people don't see, okay, that's not milestone. That this is not a final release, so we don't use it, which I don't think is a good idea. But of course, the people have to decide that and see it from a different perspective here. And that point we are thinking about, and should we drop that habit and don't do that anymore and change that and just put out some more frequent releases. That's one of the points we're discussing at the moment, yeah. And we should reconsider that.
Is it actually possible right now with the current Maven version to specify the core plugins outside my POM? So, I have global Maven installation, so I would like to fiddle in my M2 repository and say, just, pick the compiler plugin, this, and my POM is empty.
Technically, you can preload it so in a way to put them into your cache. Okay. And then it will pick up the ones which are in there. But the point, if you delete your cache, work is smashed away.
I thought you have registry or XML file where you can specify them.
No, we don't do that. We don't have that anymore. The POM is the specification here. And if there is no specification in there, we have some of them. It's the so-called super POM, but we don't define them in that way, because we have some handlers for some particular plugins which make a relationship in Maven core to have at least, for example, if you decide to create a jar file, then the jar file has some information about which plugins should be used. And that's one of the things you mentioned earlier, to update in the Maven core. That's exactly the relationship which we do here. And that is the internal configuration, which plugins are used here. That's configured in Maven core, and that needed to be changed and updated, yes.
So what does it mean if I say Maven compile, then this is already then Maven should know which Java plugin should be loaded, Java compiler plugin should be loaded. And you're saying this is hard-coded in Maven?
There is at the moment in so-called handler, that is exactly there, coded. You can see that on the Maven Apache org/ref page. There is an information about this configuration, and then you see the default plugin bindings. Then you see some plugin version. Exactly there it is specified at the moment, yes.
Okay. I didn't expect it. I thought that it is configured somewhere, and we should change the configuration then.
Yeah. That's not. We are thinking about if we could extract these information in a more different way, maybe to make it more flexible in some ways, but we are not sure at the moment if that would be a good idea. We are discussing a lot about that, in particular related to Maven 4 and 5, because at the moment we are changing things like using the Maven core in a different way, extracting several things, extracting some plugin APIs and things like that, make them simpler, more reliable, things like that. And we are discussing also about that because we see also people complaining about that. On the other hand, people are complaining one side of the side of the coin, and the other people don't because they like it. But I don't know what correctly, but of course there are different strategies to go. And I think the most recent one would be a good idea in the end, to get more updates, more recent versions, and better feedback maybe. Yeah.
I think it was not a problem until we got more frequent Java releases. So I was always happy with Maven. And then JUnit 5 happened. And, this was then the first terrible experience because I had to, at the beginning, I think there were 2 plugins, and then I have just one, which is fine. And then Java 17 happened, or 11, and I needed, to upgrade the compiler and also the Surefire. And I said, this is crazy. So, Java 11 is there, and I use the freshest Maven, and still doesn't build out of the box. I think this is broken experience, absolutely broken from my perspective.
Yeah.
This cannot happen.
Yeah.
And what I see is there are some people who are really big, and some people, this is absolutely reasonable strategy if you have, a very important and stable project to lock down all the plugins versions. So this is just reasonable, and you get reproducible builds. This is just great. But what I don't see, the middle way, you can say some plugins are declared and some are not. So this is, you don't gain anything. So for me, is either I declare everything, or we try, to just have empty POM with just my dependencies, and this should also work. So both are valid strategies. Strategies in between, I don't believe it, because then you will spend up the entire night debugging stuff because you're assuming something which is not true. This is what,
true, yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, cool. What are the nice features in Maven 4, if you can talk about it?
Yes, of course. One of the most important things we are doing at the moment in Maven 4 is, of course, a lot of cleanups, because we are smashing really away some deprecated stuff, because that's a major change, and maybe we break things, yes, but that's the chance to do that over the last 10, 12, 15 years, because we have marked several things deprecated, but not really removed them, because only minor changes, of course. And that is one of the biggest points, that we are really removing stuff at the moment. In particular, compatibility to Maven 2, things like that are kept in the code for over 10 years. And now we are cleaning up that. Several checkings for the cache, optimization for the cache, which is already in 3.8.2. There have been some improvements for the cache, that you can run a parallel build on with 2 Maven builds using the same local cache, which has been fixed at the moment. There had been a problem, yes, that had been fixed. We have some implementations to use a Redis cache, for example, in particular for CI/CD build, which is already in 3.8.2 possible. To be honest,
that's nice. What it means, you can have 2 builds using the same cache, 2 builds at the same time,
exactly.
or
yes,
2 concurrent builds.
2 concurrent builds. Yeah, correctly. The point was that there was some problem in the resolver, which doesn't allow to access the local cache in concurrent accessing, because there was no locking. In the meantime, we have some of them. Hopefully. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure that it will perfectly work. Maybe we'll find some other issues, but the first things, people are testing that, and it looks good at the moment, so it's not a big problem. That's one of the things that will come with Maven 4 as well. But the most important thing we have also...
wait a second, I'm just curious. Is this the -C and -T setting you're talking about? So if I say, Maven build -C 1 or 2, how many cores and how many threads Maven is using?
No. The usage, of course, is -T to use multiple cores during the build, multi-threading. for if you have a large
you're talking
if you have two on a CI, usually you have running two parallel jobs,
two concurrent builds,
and they are accessing the same local cache because based on size or space restriction or something like that, you don't want to have a cache for each build separated, which was the usual setup because that's the cleanest way, because Maven was by definition before that not designed to have a cache which is accessed from two different builds, Maven builds. That was inherently done that way. But that has been changed. We have some documentation about that already on the 3.8 pages and on the most recent pages. But the Maven 4 is one big step because we have some problems which realize many people, of course we as well, but we can't change it over the time. The thing is we are mixing two things in the POM file. You have a description of your dependencies. Yeah,
Carl, sure. One question just regarding the concurrent builds, because I played with it a lot, minus T and minus C. And it seems like for a standard build with compile package and unit tests and integration tests, it was almost no difference.
You must say a parallel build makes only sense if you have a multi-module build. Not with a single module.
Exactly.
In a single module setup,
exactly.
You usually can parallelize your tests. Unit test usually, that works. Mm-hmm. Integration test is a different story because maybe you have dependencies, something like that, order, execution, something like that. But if you have a multi-module build, you can use multi-threads to build more faster. And that gets letting a lot, depending on the modules, how many modules you have, or something like that. That brings a lot, 20, 30, 50%.
By the way, this is in my project. This is the first killer features to know to use multi-module build, because I always avoided that. So there was always pointless because in my projects, right? So enterprise, and why it was pointless? Because what most of the projects did, all modules have the same versions, and everything was released at once, and there was no process of releasing one module separately. So there was a small team, multi-module, and there was no added value. But with the concurrent builds, this could actually be interesting.
The concurrent build on the module level. That means if you have a build, for example, 50, 100, or even more modules in a single build, each module has the same version. Yes, of course, usually that way. And then you can run with -T, for example, 3 to use 3 threads, or 1C, or a thread per core, or something like that. And depending on the structuring of the modules, the dependencies, you can increase the build time or reduce the build time to be from 20 seconds to 10, or maybe from a minute to 50 seconds, or 30 seconds, 20, 50 seconds.
Yeah.
That's depending on your structure, because the decision is made on the dependencies of the modules, which can be really built in parallel. The Maven daemon also makes it a little bit more tricky and improves that also. It uses under the hood the -T as well, multi-threaded, but has some optimizations which can be increase the speed another time. From -T to Maven daemon, it can be increased, but the difference is a little bit less than from usual single thread build to multi-threaded build. But that is basic since Maven 3 in there. So for a long time, and it is interesting that not many people are using that, because I don't know.
No. This I also don't know. It was announced at Java 1. It is a long time ago by Jason Van Zyl. I think he talked about that, about the concurrent builds, and I was always interested because I'm always interested in speed up the build. So, but my impression is that Maven could be faster. So if I watch it is still fast, right? So it is like my build currently, it is like the Quarkus build with unit tests, whatever. It takes maybe 4 seconds. But it seems like sometimes there are pauses or something happens between. So how well profiled is such an application? Is like, do you have a process, or someone in the community is doing, like you have a simple Java build, and someone profiled it already, how the plugins interact with each other? Because I think it could be done a lot. I don't know what's the potential.
Let me say it that way. We have over the time of the different Maven versions from 3 whatever to most recent 3.8.4, for example, or 3.8.5, you can see a lot of difference between the performance of a build, in particular related to build time and execution, and also related to the used versions of the plugins itself, because they had been improved over the time a lot. That's why the first recommendation I can always give: use the most recent version of Maven. That's the most important thing I can really tell everybody, because I have made some performance testing over the time and seen that there is a big difference. In particular, the larger your project becomes, the bigger the difference is. For example, if you have a big build with 1,000 modules and build with 3.6, it will take a lot longer than with 3.8.4, in particular related to performance as well as memory consumptions. There is a big thing. Official process does not exist at the moment. Yes, I'm starting over the last half year. I've started something about that because I was interested as well, to just have a comparison between Maven versions and JDK versions. For example, if you run on the most recent JDK 17, it's much faster than on running on JDK 8, for example. The same build. It makes a big difference, yes. And that was one of the things I'm doing a lot testing, because I see also differences. We had some issues with memory in older versions. That's true, yeah. And that's one of the potentials. We do that not on a regular basis. I'm doing that on my spare time, just testing that. But I think we need to do that on a more formal way, do that. Because
this would be also great community involvement, right? You could prepare a project, say, this is a profile, and go for it, because this is fun. You know, the project is ready to use, and they have connect with the profiler. We could use even GraalVM or something, or mission control right now, or something very simple. Yeah, and then I would say for community, this would be great involvement, that they can give them, you know, a badge or whatever, and yeah. But you are talking about big projects, so I don't have a lot of big projects anymore. So even, you know, large companies, what they are doing, they are going microservices or clouds, whatever, and they have a lot of smaller projects. And my projects are maybe a couple of hundred classes usually, one module, and this is basically it. And this is what I'm observing, the performance, which really interests me, because what I'm really interested in, you know, in fast startup and just, you know, fast iterations. And this is what I see that's, you know, let's say Maven compiles and then it starts, you know, to perform the unit tests. For me, it takes a little bit too long until it wakes up and does something. You know, it seems like this is what I see. The transition between plugins could be optimized. I never, you know, performed the profiling, but I have you here, and it would be interesting, you know, to hear about the potential which could be done. So if the plugins were more hardwired with each other, maybe. So you have, like, you know, a ready to use plugin chain. So this could be a thing, right? So not like I have the compiler plugin and Surefire plugin or whatever plugin. So we could have a Java build plugin, Facade, which already integrates with the 4 other plugins. This could speed things up, I guess.
Yeah, there had been an approach done by Jason Van Zyl with the Ticari build lifecycle, which exactly does that, to combine that, for example. Okay. The point is, yes, you can do that, but the point is, based on the concept of Maven, that you have separated plugins. And yes, there are some related things which could be improved, I think. To be honest, I have no clue how large the improvement could be, or in which areas we are maybe talking about. Maybe increase of 5%, 2%, I don't know, simply because we have no measurement at the moment. Might be a good idea to do that. And on the other hand, if you just start to combine them, then you might lose some flexibility. Yes, might be a good, might be not a good. Yeah, depending on what you're doing. If you have a single module build, yes, the performance can be improved in some ways. Startup time is one thing, because the usual run and startup time of Maven is depending on the JVM. Yes, of course. The point is, you can do some optimizations with some Java options. If I correctly remember, you can reduce that a lot. I have read something about some guy had some testing done there and improved the startup time. Yes, unfortunately, I don't remember that anymore, but I will find out. The other point is, yes, you are seeing many companies are going to microservice, smaller projects. That's true. But on the other hand, there are also companies which having for example, a single repo setup where 200
Exactly.
microservices
You're right.
in there, and then you have to build the whole stuff. Yes. But of course, there are several things which can be improved, and I think both of them would be getting more better performance if we think about the smaller steps we are doing. We are doing it all the time and improving that, and I think the improvements have been done over the time, and I think there are more potential. Of course, we need to do some real good measurement. I started with that, and exactly that is the point, because we need some more formal process, let's say formal process, or to be having a defined set of project which can be measured and seen. Okay, that's the performance for that setup. This is the performance for that setup, and saying, okay, where could be the real issue? The startup, the plugins, the startup time of the JVM, of Maven itself, or something like that. We need to figure out that. To be honest, yes. I think that's definitely a point where we are need to do some work. At the moment, I'm doing something, I had set up that, but I need to make that in more a formal way, and to make that a setup to you just clone that Git repository and start it up and see what happened. And in the end, you should present the results in somehow a good way, looking good, something like that. I don't know. At the moment, I'm working on that because I'm interested in that.
Oh, really? That's actually great. Okay. That is excellent that I'm asking about that. Interesting.
That is one of the points in particular. That's why I'm always recommending using the most recent one of Maven, because it's most important.
But for me, why I'm talking about convention over configuration. So we have several kind of projects. This is true. So we have monolithic projects and projects like my project, which are more simpler. But what I'm interested in is developer experience in onboarding. So I think we are not competing with other Java projects. We are competing with Node.js, Python, or whoever. So, and for me, it is that if I download the recent Maven version, and we say Maven is a standard build for Java, and we download the recent LTS version of Java, it should work out of the box. This is the message I have, that without any configuration whatsoever, because you cannot really explain a fresh Java developer why, if he downloads the standard Java build and standard Java 17 LTS, he has to do some fiddling in order, to set up the compiler chain or whatever. Yeah. This is not understandable. Whatever we are saying here doesn't work. So if this works somehow, then we can optimize things in whatever direction. We say, okay, this is not our convention. It's not optimal. It could break your build in the future, which Node.js also does. I mean, this is standard. Everything gets broken over time. And but if you lock down the plugins, then the chances are lower that something happens. I mean, at one point of time, you will have to migrate, right? So this was just my summary. So it's not like I'm not happy, because but I don't also like to take to look at the POM, which is unnecessary complex. This makes me angry. So what I like, short POMs. And they were always short in my projects. With Java E, I had one dependency, and I always removed these strange EJB plugins, whatever. I didn't even knew what they did. There were no EJB plugins, there was just simple stuff. And now, and this is the main message, just a summary, so that my motivation. I like to keep, and I like Java and like Maven, and it has to be simple.
Let me point out exactly here.
Okay, always
from that point, 2 points. Downloading Maven is one of the issues some people are complaining as well, because there are existing things like the Maven wrapper, for example, which you can do that and configure that in your project, and you don't even have to download your Maven version on your own. It will be done by the Maven wrapper, for example. That's one of the things which is improved, which is working in the meantime. We have the Maven wrapper officially into Apache Software Foundation in the meantime. That took a long time to get there because of license regulations and all that stuff. That's a thing. And on the other hand, yes, we are thinking about exactly the same thing, because make the setup and introduction for onboarding more simpler. Yes, that's true. One other thing is smaller POMs, which get me the chance to get back to Maven 4, what is improving there. And we are doing one thing, because a POM usually does at the moment two things. It defines dependencies, one thing, which is fine. But on the other hand, it defines plugins or configurations and things like that. Means building stuff. So we need to separate these two things, which are combined into one thing, separation of concern, simply to say. We have one point is dependencies and one the build part. And the point is, what you already can do with Maven 3 is using the flattened Maven plugin to separate and produce a POM, which is later usable for the consumer of your library or of your project. It's something like that. That's one point. And that is, in the meantime, in Maven 4, that has gone into the Maven core. It will done that out of the box without a problem. You don't need to configure a supplemental plugin or something like that. It's done by the core in the meantime. That means you can deploy a POM which only contains the dependencies, no build stuff anymore if you don't need that. We are working on that. It's not ready yet, but we have some steps which is needed. So make it possible to have a separation between the so-called build POM and the consumer POM. That is one of the things we are working on and works more. So we have a separation there. And the most important step, why is it so important? It gives us the opportunity to make a separation here. So that means we can produce a POM which is put to Maven Central or something else and in the repository manage or whatever, that can be consumed by others. And the other thing is we have a build POM, which now we can use and maybe change if we need. Put supplemental information in there, change the format of the POM if we like to, things like that, where it keeps working on. And that is the most important thing we are doing in Maven 4 is to make a separation between these things. And there are coming other things based on that. If you reconsider that in particular on a multi-module release build, the point is that you have to specify all the time the version of the parent. For example, if you have a child module, you have to say parent with version and things like that. So if you really think about that, the version is not needed because automatically, usually, convention here is to say one level higher the parent, you can find the parent. If you change the structure, of course, that's a different story. But if you use that setup and say, my parent is exactly one level higher, which is the default. And now you can say, do I really need that version? No, you don't. You can just omit that version. And there are other possibilities to do that. If you consequently think about that and say, okay, if I know I have a POM in the root level of my project, then I can say, okay, I have a list of modules. Then I see, okay, there is a directory, which is called like that. There must be a POM as well. And that POM usually points back to that parent to have the relationship, all that other stuff. So the next point you can say, why do I need to define that there is a parent? Because it automatically searches for that. Then you can say, maybe we can omit that as well. We're not doing that at the moment, but that's one of the things we are thinking about at the moment to make that simpler, to make the POM simpler and things like that. Also, you can think about of the dependencies which are defined between the modules. You have interdependencies between the modules. For example, module A is using module B. And
now I have an idea. What you could do then is, if you say you don't have to declare a super POM, what you could do is then you can say, if you don't have a super POM, then you get the super POM from Maven. And this super POM from Maven will ship with Maven as a XML. And it comes with a list of plugins, of the core plugins. And then if I'm not happy with it, I could go to Maven, and even nicer would be at several super POMs. I could say, give me the freshest, give me the LTS version, which is half years old, or give me even the latest, whatever. This could be actually a great thing because in worst case, I have a single line configuration in my Maven POM from which standard super POM I'm inheriting, and I get the goodness, which and if I'm not happy with it, I could still define everything in my POM. So this could be actually a nice use case.
We are thinking about that as well, because we have to make it clear, we have a separation by naming. We have a super POM. The super POM is contained in Maven itself, to be clear, and you have a root POM from a multi-module build. And then you have a super POM with all the modules and several levels maybe. And yes, that super POM could be defined somehow, and maybe just by using group ID, artifact ID version. As usual, we use that convention. That could be done. But at the moment, it is not possible. But this separation between build and consumer POM is the first big step we are doing in the Maven to make things like that thinkable and implementable or doable. Because before that, it's completely impossible to do something. Because if we change the POM format in any way, we are breaking everything. And that's the biggest issue we had. And the compatibility here is the problem in the end. Because something like Java has as well, it can't break things. Backward compatibility must be kept. And that's the same way we do work. Because if you think about Maven Central, for example, you have millions of POMs there. And if you change the format, you break everything. You can't use them anymore. Or if you produce them, someone else cannot use that. For example, if I build here with Maven 5 and produce something like that, and no one can use that with Gradle or with whatever tool you are using, for example, or vice versa. That doesn't matter. But breaking the POM format itself is not possible. But we need to make a separation here. And that's the most important thing we are doing in Maven 4.
But you could offer alternative formats like JSON or even Java.
Yeah,
builders, right?
Correctly. Yes, that's true. The point is of offering different formats is the question, because most build tools, as far as I know, are already using a different format. They are consuming usual POM, and you can define that in a different way. You define it like a JSON-like or Ruby-like for Grape or something like that. But the POMs itself are kept as XML files in Central, for example. And we have thought a lot about things like different formats like JSON, YAML, whatever. But in the end, we have decided to keep XML format because at the moment it is the best format. It is more or less trivial to read. Yes, some people are complaining about that because it's XML. Something.
No, you're right.
On the other hand, all tools working well. The readers about XML are very good. They are very good supported. There are a lot of things about there. You can handle that very well, and the readers are very performed. In particular, if you have a larger POM or XML files and things like that. And that's one of the points we have thought a lot about that, but in the end, we have decided we keep XML as a basic format,
Because several times I thought about generating POMs because I didn't want to use the Maven archetype back then.
Sure.
So we know if I would generate JSON is a little bit easier. So I could use JSON-B or JSON-P. To generating XML is a little bit harder. So it could be an option for local development, but I see your point. If you push it somewhere, then it But you could actually on Maven deploy it could be converted to the canonical XML Maven model. So you could have local JSON or YAML, whatever you like. But in the repository is always XML. And I like XML actually. XML is readable, and you get code completion, or how I call it, auto completion, and nothing against XML. So it's a way better than YAML, let's say, right? So this is my personal opinion.
Exactly. The point is what you can already do, and it's opening that if we have a build POM, then we can think about and say our build POM in the future might use YAML, JSON, whatever we like in the end.
Exactly.
If we do that, that's a different story, but technically it would be possible. On the other hand, if you like to use already things like YAML, JSON or something like, there is a polyglot Maven project which already supported that. It exactly does that and gives you the opportunity to write your POM in Ruby, for example. And then if you deploy that, it will convert that to a POM file. That is doable if you like that.
This is, I don't like that, but if you would show that the build POM can be JSON or even YAML, then people will have less to complain.
Yeah.
Right? So it is not like, I'm not talking is this necessary. It's more like from the marketing and psychological and political perspective, not technical perspective.
Not.
Just saying that we are supporting JSON in YAML, so there is one argument less, not to use Maven. Because right now I hear a lot, Maven is XML, but my XML is usually like 30 lines of XML. So this was my regular Java E project. So there was just type war back then, one single dependency Java E, and this basically what it was. It was the simplest possible configuration you could get. This is why I was against, all the explicit compiler and core configuration, because my Maven POMs for years were roughly 50 lines of code. Now are a little bit longer. And so for me, it was not issue. You get an issue if you have lots of plugins stuff, what I see, right? But then you can say, okay, from the 50 lines of XML, you could even get 30 lines of YAML or JSON if you like. I will probably still use XML, but if it is possible, it's interesting. And Polyglot Maven is different. It's not the conventional way, right? So there's project for everything, and it's how it's called, the tyranny of the default, right? So if the Maven core already supports different formats, it is way better experience than using a third-party build tool. This is different story.
Exactly.
Right?
But the point is here, to make things like that possible, the first step is to make a separation between that, because that's what we are doing with Maven 4 to make this separation possible. And that's most important here. And that is the biggest step we do. And otherwise we can't change other things like enhancing the build POM for supplemental information, or removing information which is not used or not needed, or doesn't make sense some ways. For example, the repository entries in the POM file, something like that. Does it make sense to put them? No, in a usual environment, it doesn't make sense, because you usually consume from a repository manager and have your configuration in your settings file, for example, and things like that. If you do that, put them into the POM file, it makes possibilities open to make injections possible. If you consume that build, it will take informations from other repositories which might not be allowed, for example. And that's why many people are saying, and the general rule in Maven Central is, your POM is not allowed to have repository entries in there. And that's the reason why. Many other repositories don't have that. But in the meantime, we have also changed with Maven 3.8.1 to consume only HTTPS repositories, no HTTP repositories, for example. Many people are complaining it, but that's for security reasons. Otherwise, you can inject everything in your build. And that's not a good idea, to be honest.
This is reasonable, I would say.
That's the point. Some people are complaining about that because why it doesn't work? Yeah, the reason is you shouldn't do that, because that's a security issue and can be one of them. Yes, of course, you need to do that. And that's the way into Maven 4 to make the things like that possible. Otherwise, it's not possible if you don't change that.
So until I interrupted you mentioned that two concurrent Maven builds are possible, and we get speed up with the multi-module build. And then I presented my idea back with the conventional configuration. But are there any other exciting features in Maven 4 or you're excited about, or features or approaches, strategies?
The thing is, we are improving a lot of things. The handling of the multi-module build, the setup, the startup, if some build breaks. A startup point is improved. I cannot talk about the details because at the moment I simply don't know them. We have a lot of improvements. But the most important thing is the separation, things like that. One thing we have upgraded, which is not a very big deal for Maven 4, that we require minimum JDK 8 as to run. That's one of the things we did. That was one thing because the internal implementation had been changed and using some special features. There are a lot of small improvements about handling of settings.
One question, why not Java 11? Why not Java 11?
To be honest, we discussed it a lot. The point is, if we change that to JDK 11, we are forcing people to do that. Because we had decided and thought about that, but to be honest, we are a build tool. And the decision which JDK version should be used should be decided by the development team. We decided to use JDK 8 at minimum because it gives us technical improvements, technical features which are not available in 7 in several ways and improvements, like internal stuff like streaming and things like that. And there was some requirements for implementation of the separation, makes it easier and things like that. And we have thought about that. The problem is we have seen a lot of builds and seen a lot of people exactly the requirements for a build. If we use that and say, okay, you have to use JDK8 for your build, many people would complain because they are using older versions. Yes, to be honest, we could say, okay, that's your problem. If you're not updated your build the last 10 years, it's your problem. But that's one of the reliabilities we are keeping in Maven. That's a good way. And I think that's the most important thing we do, that we are keeping compatibility over the long time, which other tools don't. The other thing is we have seen several frameworks, like Spring does that for the next release, is JDK 17 at minimum, for example, with Spring 3. We have a long time discussed about that and decided we keep at minimum JDK 8 for Maven 4, because if we go higher, it could be a problem with accepting that, because many larger companies are already on JDK 11. They are keeping on JDK 8, maybe in contradiction to the timeline of JDK 8, because it's officially ended in March this year of Oracle. You can get that from others like Azul, Belsoft, and things like that, or Corretto also. But that was the decision to keep that. Maybe we can change that before it released, but at the moment, I think we keep JDK 8 at minimum. I think that's a good decision at the moment.
The decision is good for the projects, but the decision is not good for the plugin maintainers. I would say they also would like to have some fun, I guess, with the newest technology, and with Java 11. For instance, you get the Java HTTP client, lots of stuff which I already forgot because I'm using the Java 11 for years right now, so I don't even know what's not in Java 8. But Java 11 would be. I would decide differently, because if you would like to have contributors to Maven, you should offer them attractive opportunity, I would say. In Java 11 or Java 17, Java 8 is really hard, I would say. So in my current projects, I use AWS Lambda with Java 11, and I'm already angry because I would like to have Java 17, what I already have. So we made it work, but I would like to have blocks. I can imagine, even for testing, if you are testing Maven and you have Java 17 with multi-line with the text blocks, you can just copy and paste the entire XML and make a template and test it. So this is a huge time saver. So not having that in Maven is really a burden on the contributors.
Yeah, let me say it that way. There are two things. If you're testing Maven itself, then the question is how you're testing that. Copying your POM into your test might be an opportunity, but it's not usually the way we do testing. On the other hand, yes, would be a plus option, of course, for developers, of course. On the other hand, if you think about if you really want to test with JDK 7, technically, you can create a build and say, my tests are running under JDK 17. But your outcoming code or production code is running in JDK 8 or even 7. That's possible. That's no problem, technically. We don't do that in Maven Core plugins, neither in Maven Core itself. Yes, you are right. There are some things, yes, like HTTP and in Java 11, several small stuffs, yes. But to be honest, if you test a Maven plugin or Maven Core, you don't use an HTTP client for testing, because we have some access to a repository which is already done by a library resolver in Maven Core and things like that. So you don't need to really access via HTTP or on your own. Yes, of course you can do that, and it is much more attractive, to be honest. Yes, true. I don't see the real advantage of using a more recent version. It would be
VAR.
Yes, I know completely. I know the things like VAR and things like that makes some things easier. Yes, that's absolutely true. I'm completely agree with you, because I'm working on a project where we are working towards JDK 7 at the moment. We use already JDK 11 as well in production code. That's no problem. Yes, but we are trying to keep at the moment a JDK 8 level, because that gives the opportunity to run Maven on a very broad way of JDKs.
No, I'm with you. This strategy of a project is, but I'm just talking about you as contributor.
Yes, true.
It would be for all contributors a lot more fun to use Java 17?
Yeah, the point is if it is a difference to make a discussion about that if we are capped on JDK 8 and say, okay, here are
Yeah.
some contributors, they would come getting into the project related if we are just using JDK 7 because we are using JDK 7. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to get contributors, because just on the language feature, or would we like to have contributors based on the functionality or problem or bug fixing or
on the functionality, but if a fresh contributor will look at the project and you see, oh, this is JDK 1.1, so okay, then
that's not the case because we're
I'm not. Yeah, and I know. You know what I mean. So, last thing, which is an unfair question, but still, are there any experiments with GraalVM or J-Link or something?
Yeah,
like this?
we have one point. I tested something with Graal because I wanted to know to exactly the point for the startup time, for example. But the problem with Graal is in the end is if you compile Maven, that works, but the problem is that the plugins are dynamically loaded during the runtime, and that's the problem here. And that is not a feasible one, and that doesn't work anymore. That's the biggest problem here.
Except we have the chain,
yeah, exactly.
of the
that
plugins,
might be an opportunity. Yes, of course. We're thinking of a lot of things like that. But the other point is, at the moment, exactly for that, I'm thinking about these performance testing and where are opportunities to improve the performance, runtime, setup, how long does it take to get a plugin running? What is the real pain point here from a performance perspective here? And that is one of the points why I'm doing some setup for testing and see what is the difference. To be honest, in the end, depending on what you're doing, is the simplest thing to improve your build performance, mostly with a measurable improvement, is to use a different JDK. That's not always the right choice, but that helps a lot. That's the first step. And do some optimizations for the JVM startup. There are some GC options, things like that, and startup options, checking things, you can turn them off. And that improves the startup time a lot. That's true. But of course, it should be done that we take a deeper look what takes time to start up a plugin. How is it done? Maybe we can think about how the mechanism is working in Maven to start up and make it possible to run with Graal. But the point I know at the moment is everything which can be done with Graal, if you do a compilation in native code, means it must be exactly knowable during build time. And that's exactly the contradiction here, because Maven build is based on the concept that you can continuously start a plugin during runtime or not in build time. And that's the problem for Maven.
But it's not that contradictory, because I have Java EE and application server background, and what the application servers did for years, they loaded dynamically war, which is not a different to a plugin. Yeah. They look inside and release lots of metadata. What Quarkus is mostly compatible with application servers, and what Quarkus does, it does it at build time. It looks, at the dependencies and the application, and then generates bytecode or GraalVM image. So what should work is that I'm building once with Maven my POM, then I know all the dependencies, and then create once for my POM a GraalVM image, and this would be actually perfect, because now all my dependencies are locked down. This is the ultimate, reproducible build, true. Because everything is in one single binary. And so, of course, the first build will take 5 minutes, but the subsequent build will be very fast.
True. Yeah, we are not finished with, or I'm not finished with thinking about that and making experiments about what can we do. One other thing is, if you are thinking about things like that, images like Docker, for example, we are thinking about separating in Maven 4 things for different caches, saying, okay, we have a cache for snapshots, we have a cache for releases, to make that a separate part. So, which could be improved building with Docker images, for example. You have one with the releases, which are not changing very often. The snapshots always changing. So you have different layers in Docker images, for example, and that can be improving things like that as well. So there are several steps we are thinking about, or we are thinking about to enhance the format which is distributed to Maven Central, for example, to put in supplemental information to have a resolved dependency tree, for example, to make downloads more faster, for example. At the moment, it is, if you build, every time there is a dependency, it will be downloaded and taking a look into the POM of that dependency. And there are other dependencies, so picking up the dependencies from repository, central or repository manager, it doesn't matter. And then go that through all the loops until you have everything collected. But the point is, this tree could be resolved beforehand, and then can be stored in a temporary different format and maybe distributed to central. We have documented somewhere on the pages. And then you can use that to make a bulk download from central or from your repository manager for building and things like that. That we are thinking also about, to make these things more faster and easier to handle, or maybe using different tools, like not a repository manager, maybe you use a simple web server or something like that. That is at the moment not working, but maybe that will be the future.
Are you aware of Piranha Cloud?
Piranha, I can remember.
This is Arjan Times from Java security guy. What he does, he implements a microprofile compliant runtime, a small application server, which is tiny, and he exclusively uses Maven for isolation and dependency resolution.
Okay.
So this is a really interesting project because he loads all the dependencies just using exclusively Maven. So the Maven is the class loader for him. So the Maven dependency, and works well for him. There was a podcast with him as well. So it could be interesting because he does also some work with the dependency resolution.
Okay, yeah, that might be interesting. Yeah,
we cover a lot actually. I'm really happy with the outcome, so I understand better, and I know now that my my ideas are not that crazy.
No, of course not.
Because on Twitter everyone said, okay, no, it's not possible. You break everything, and I couldn't understand why, and now I have better understanding why.
Yeah, that's
and where people can find you and how they maybe help you or contribute to Maven if they're interested in Java 8 projects.
Yes, of course. You can find me on Twitter, on Xing, on LinkedIn, wherever you like. That's no problem. Just search for my name on the Maven page.
Yeah, what's your name?
Heinz.
Say it.
The point is, if you would like to help, the first thing I suggest is to take a look on the developers mailing list. That's the most important. Yeah, I know it's a mailing list, is old stuff, but works perfectly. Works very well to see the discussion. And if you would like to work on something or have some ideas, just put them on there and start a discussion about them. Then you get feedback. That's one of the things if you have ideas. If you want to work on some issues, there is a gyro tracker on the ASF project on the Maven pages, maven.apache.org. And there is a link to the issues. And there you can find a thing up for grabs, if I correctly remember. Then you can find several gyro entries, which are a simple starter, to say it that way. These are more or less simple. And then you can start how to work on that. But first, show up on the mailing list to that someone knows that you are trying to work on that, and just say, oh, I would like to work on that. I have seen that issue. I would like to try that. And then some of the committers can help you how to go through the process, how to do that, how to correctly do that. Maybe help you to create your first pull request and review that. It's most important that we not only accept code, we also need some improvements on the documentation, make it more understandable how it works. If you write some more detailed description how things like working or why they are working that way, it would be great to have them maybe on the Maven side as well. So if you have contributions to the documentation, please make an issue what you think it's not good or could be improved, or you can create an issue and say that should be added to the documentation because I don't understand that, or it's not documented anywhere, or maybe not clear. Do that and start working on that. That is a contribution as well. It's very important to have that. It's not only on code, it's on documentation, on Jira. Take a look if you can reproduce some issues, but just in after the communication on the dev list, that we prevent duplicated work, because that's sometimes happened in the history, and that's not good for either the the committer as well for the people are trying to communicate and contribute and saying, oh, that's already fixed. I'm working for nothing. That's not a good idea. So communication first, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and when we can expect Maven 4?
Very good question. To be honest, I don't know. At the moment, we are working on that. We are trying to think about, at the moment, we are thinking about that. We should get that out this year somehow. I don't know if that's correct, but we are trying to do that. To get at least a 4.0 Alpha 1 or something like that, to get that first one out.
So Christmas would be a good date.
Maybe. I don't know if we can get it a Christmas gift. I don't know. But the idea is to get that this year because there's a lot of work, cleanup and things like that to get the plugins working.
Yeah, sure.
We are changing the plugin API to make it more reliable, and in particular to get a relationship with the old plugins that they keep working, that we don't break all the plugins and things like that. That's a lot of work. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It was a pleasure. So we covered lots of ground, and it was a really interesting talk.
I hope so. Thank you very much as well. It was a great pleasure to be here. Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.